This is the Table for Two edition of the Deliberate Talks podcast, and I'm your host, Dakshin Adyanthaya, welcoming you to a conversation with changemakers who reevaluate the landscape of how we professionally lead today. In today's episode, we're turning our focus into the world of design education and its paramount importance in cultivating the next wave of creative thinkers. So sit back and relax, and let's navigate through this intriguing intersection of art, business, and education together with one of the most recognized individuals in the industry, Chris Do. Chris is an Emmy Award winning designer, director, CEO, and chief strategist of Blind and the founder of The Future, an online education platform with the mission of teaching 1 billion people on how to make a living with what they love doing. In our conversation with Chris today, we will engrave into the importance of design education and how to speak the language of art and business together. All this and more with Chris right after this intro. Superb, and we are back. Hello, Chris. Super excited to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for making time. And how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Super. So, Chris, like I mentioned, this is going to be a little light of a conversation. And we normally have a warm-up session where we just kind of ask an impromptu question.
Okay.
So if the world today still didn't know who Chris Do was, in 3 words, how would you tell them who you are?
Educator, father, entrepreneur.
Brilliant. What a way to start. Awesome then. So now that we're prepared, let's get ready for the first round of questions. So I'm going to be asking you around 5 to 6 questions here, basically about design thinking, entrepreneurship, and every amazing thing that you keep doing around the world. So let me start with asking you, Chris Do before becoming the Chris Do, right? Let's start with what was the life problem there, climbing up ladder one at a time, putting up the work out there, focusing on creating content. Tell me all those hits and misses, and what do you enjoy about the process to reach where you are today?
How far back do you want me to go? The hits and the misses.
Whatever inspires people to start at whatever age they are today.
Okay, I'll tell you a couple of things. Now, keep in mind, everybody, I started my business in 1995. That's why I need to narrow the scope of the timeline. A couple of things. First, I'll start with a miss. I started the company with business partners that we were not aligned in what we did, and they owned 51% of the company. And I agreed because I was desperate to start a business, and they provided the financial capital that I needed to run the business. But luck would have it that we were profitable from the first month. I didn't need the money, and so I started to regret, why did I go into business with anybody? I just needed to believe in myself, and sometimes just to know that you have a financial backer is all the encouragement that you need. And so luckily for me, everything worked out. They exited the company, and I was on my own again, and it was doing great. So that was a hit or a miss, but it turned into a valuable life lesson for me. One that I would repeat many more times, because sometimes those lessons, it's like a wooden head you just don't learn the first time around. A hit for me was meeting a producer who taught me how to bid on jobs. Because prior to that, I just did what most creative people do in my space. We kind of just make it up as we go. And then when I realized there's a very formal way to build bids, take a lot of the guesswork out of it to make sure you're profitable, but also ways to put numbers into bid that would increase what you ask for. And that was a life lesson, because I was artificially holding myself back from asking for what I was worth. And the last hit I will share with you is in the early 2000s, I met my business mentor, business coach, Keir McLaren, who I wound up working with for 13 years. It was a very serendipitous meeting that I had with a business colleague who was talking about how his life had changed and how his business had doubled. Hey, when somebody's doing that, you want a piece of that too. So I had to have enough courage to ask him who is this person and can I have their phone number? And luckily he told me, and I wound up working with Keir, and he transformed my business mind. And to this day, I credit him for the single most important influence in my business mind, and probably the second most influential person on my life, aside from my father.
Wow. And so by summing up the entire thing, how important is mentorship? While you grew up, you climbed the ladder, you found a lot of people who you learned a lot from, right? In today's world, while you meet a lot of individuals, how important is mentorship?
Well, I think there's 2 schools of thought. One is I'm strong, I'm independent, I'm an autodidact, I can figure things out on my own, and you can The question is, how much pain and suffering do you want to go through? How patient are you really? I don't mean to try to take shortcuts in life, but if somebody's experienced something before, has insight into who you are, what you might be doing, what you should be doing, I would rather just pay money to learn those lessons. And here's the proof in the pudding, and people know this if they know my story. In that first year of working with Kier, almost the first real meeting that we had together, he helped me to see the client dynamic, the relationship, and how I'm supposed to show up at the meetings, and he transformed me. And so that year we went from doing $2.2 million to $3.9 million. So I would say he was largely responsible for an increase of $1.7 million. So is business mentorship necessary or helpful? I think it is, but maybe I'm biased. I don't know.
Right. Makes sense. And while you kept climbing this ladder, I need to ask you, I'm really fascinated by the kind of hats that you wear, right? Which typically has always a copy written in it. Yes. I don't know how many people have asked about it, but I'm really curious in knowing, how do you choose those hats for yourself?
Okay, very good question. First of all, I love typography. I'm a designer at heart, and I'm an educator at heart. So when some piece of design speaks to me because of the typeset or the phrase or the symbol, I'm in love with it. More so than even the company. I love it for its pure form. And I need to wear hats because my head is a little shiny. I have oily skin, and it's like a chrome ball up here. You know, if you don't have hair and you have oily skin, it's not a great combination. So I wear the hat out of utility, but then it starts to become part of my personal brand and a trademark. And so I select the hat depending on A, the mood that I'm in, if it complements what I'm wearing, or if it's a message I want people to be aware of. So today I'm wearing something a little bit more neutral, polka dot shirt with a black thing. Some of the louder hats don't work with this, so I don't want to like mix and match things that don't go well together.
Wow. Very interesting. So I see a lot of books in the background. I see a lot of hats in your collection. What else does Christo love collecting?
I love collecting comics. I have probably a couple thousand comics conservatively. I also collect toys. I'm just a collector. I collect anything and everything, and it's not a good thing if you want to stay married for a long time. And so I buy skateboards. I have too many skateboards and not enough wall space. I buy artwork. And my wife's like, more artwork? Where are you going to put the old pieces up? And, you know, there's not even place for that. Now you're acquiring more. So one of the things is I grew up poor with my family as refugees from Vietnam coming to the United States. I didn't have a lot of things as a child. And eventually when my parents made more money and moved us out of the lower to upper middle class, I felt guilty for asking for things. So I knew if I wanted things in life, which I do, I want lots of things, I need to earn them. So when I finally started to make money, I started buying CDs. Do you guys remember CDs? I have thousands of CDs, so I'm one of the few people who does that. I'm a rare bird in that I actually buy books because I know if we don't, the stores that sell books, the things that I love, will not be in business anymore. So even though it's more convenient for us to buy it on Amazon and cheaper, I would still want to buy it from a bookstore. Maybe not all of them, but some of them to support them.
Wow, brilliant. And just curious from the entire growth story that you have beautifully shared so far, I'm keen on knowing how many people today want to talk to Christo on a daily basis.
A lot. I mean, people reach out all the time in the DMs, and somebody literally messaged me this morning. It's like, what's it going to take for you to be my mentor? If there's not enough money or time in the world that you can give to me that I would do this, because I just can't afford, in my own sense, time to dedicate to one person. I'm not in that space. You'd have to be some kind of magician ninja for me to say, well, I would take you under my wing. I just can't afford to do that these days.
Wow. I hope genuinely you can make everyone happy at some point of time and remove time for yourself as well. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Chris, for sharing that. Now let's, focus on something that there is a vision, there is a story behind the future. And you talk about your online education platform with the mission to teaching 1 billion people on how to make a living out of what they love doing, right?
Yeah.
So, and if I'm, correct me if I'm wrong, the website shows the number 31,000 plus. So is that the number of people that have already successfully been taught by you, by the future, by you, or is it still, it's a different number that I'm seeing?
It's a different number, but that is an official number. It's a number that's verifiable because each one of those numbers represents a real life human being who took their time out of their day to say, I'm one of the ones that you can count towards lives being impacted by your content. But can you only imagine like how many other people who have not ever gone to our website or who have gone to our website and haven't figured out like they want to click on a button? So currently we have 2.2 million subscribers on YouTube. I have 930,000 followers on Instagram, close to 100,000 now on the new platform Threads, 500,000 on LinkedIn. So I'm looking at an aggregate number here. So I don't just look at subscribers, but if you watched a piece of content, if you listen to a podcast, whether it's mine or yours or someone else's, and you walked away having some transformation that you can then attribute to us, I will count you as one of the billion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So how did this idea spark? How's it shaping, and what does one need to do to sign up for it, and how's the learning been so far?
And the thing is, when we are transitioning from a service company to a product company, an education company, my team asked me, like, what are we trying to do? We're trying to make money. We're trying to make courses. We're trying to build a lifestyle business. What are we doing? And I had to articulate to the team an idea. And the idea was this: my kids are too old for this, but I want to create a world where people who are entering into the college space have viable alternatives that cost a fraction of what they're paying now, that give them maybe 80 to 90% of the quality of education they come to expect, or maybe better. And if I can do that, I've done something good. And my chief operating officer, he has 2 little girls. I said, we should be ready by the time they're 18 and ready to go to school. And I can see he got emotional about this. He's like, wow, I now truly understand what it is you're trying to do. But that story does not package well. It doesn't travel well. It takes too many words. So that night I go to sleep and I wake up in the morning. I'm like, I need to say this in a more succinct way. And I said, you know what? We need to teach 1 billion people how to make a living doing what they love. I came back to the team. I told them. They said, we love it. And that becomes our thing. And how's it going so far? I think it's going excellent. And I'll tell you how I know. Because there's few places that I can walk on planet Earth now where somebody somewhere won't come up to me and say, hey, did you make that video? And depending on their energy, I might like, which video? I'm not sure. If you hate it, that's not me. I know we all look alike, and that's racist. And if they're like, no, it was really impactful, I'm like, yeah, that was me.
Right. And have you put like a timeline to this? Like, you want to achieve this 1 billion number by one of the years that you've planned for, or something of this sort?
1 year before I'm dead. That's the timeline. Because I want to be, awake and aware and cognizant, and I'm like, okay, great. And I probably won't have teeth anymore. My back will be all crooked, and I'll be bedridden. But I'm like, yes, we did it. We did it.
Lovely. Okay. Now, I'm going to take a step back from this, and I hope that 1 billion reaches as soon as possible. And
Yes.
and I hope that a lot of listeners from this podcast also instantly go there and just be a part of this entire vision. It's beautiful. It's great what you're doing. And I want to take a step back from, a lot of clients today, I'm sure, come to you. A lot of brands come to you and say, hey, do a great workshop for our employees, or help us from a business problem standpoint and all those kind of things. But can you share an example of a project or a collaboration that pushed you outside your comfort zone? One, how did you handle it if it's an unfamiliar territory? And what did you learn from this experience?
Yeah. I'll share a very recent example. I do mostly talks, and I run my own workshops. So every once in a while, a corporation or event organizer will ask me to do something that's more aligned with their audience. And that creates a lot of stress for me, because I'm like, okay, I have to prepare this material for the first time, and I'll be presenting it for the first time. So there's always those first time jitters. So recently I was invited to speak at Atomicon in Newcastle, and it's an event for marketers, I think. And there's like 1,000 people that are going to be there. Now, this normally wouldn't mess me up, but there's 2 things that mess me up. Number one, I was a last-minute replacement for somebody who was a keynote speaker, and they had a family emergency. So I'm like 14 days out from the event, and then they start reaching out. So I don't know that officially I'm going to speak until about 7 days prior. And I gave them a bunch of topics that I want to talk about, and they picked the one that I was least prepared to talk about, which is sales. Now, I like doing sales workshops. I like coaching people one-on-one, but doing a prepared talk for 45 minutes without a lot of audience interaction, that stuff messes me up, and it's really scary. And so I go to this conference. I'm like, I have a deck. I've prepared it, but I prepared it basically on the airplane, on the flight, in the hotel room minutes or days before. And I'm listening to the speakers, and they're all super extroverted. They're like bouncing around. They're yelling at the audience. They're dancing. They're singing. And the introvert in me is like, uh-oh, I think I'm at the wrong conference. I think they picked the wrong person for this, and everybody here seems to be enjoying it, but this is frying my circuits. I just want to go crawl back into bed and go to sleep, because it's draining all of my energy. I'm the last speaker of the event. I'm all nerves backstage, and I walk on stage kind of awkwardly, and I begin my talk, and I find my groove, and at the end of it, I get some applause, and I get off stage, and I talk to people, and the surprising thing is, they came up to me and like, that was a perfect way to end the conference. I love your energy, and you just brought it down because we were being yelled at the whole time. And we like that, but we can't handle any more of that. And thank you for being you and delivering so much value. And so I was like, what was the lesson here? The lesson is we oftentimes compare ourselves to others when we should be just really comparing ourselves to our old self versus our new self. And we also have to learn to trust event organizers when they book you. They know what they're doing. They know who you are, and they're programming it in a way that works, right? So the part that would creep in my mind in terms of self-doubt was, I was a last-minute replacement. I wasn't your first choice. I was your last choice. And I'm filling in, and do people here even know who the hell I am and want me to be here? Because they're expecting somebody else. And that other person was a female. She was black. And I'm like, I'm neither of those two things, but I'll do my best.
Wow. Very interesting story over there. And I'm sure you come across a lot of such situations around. And most of the times I'm dead sure that you leave people inspired by the way you talk and by the knowledge that you share. I want to know, how do you stay so inspired yourself, continue to generate fresh ideas in a rapidly evolving circumstances? And are there any specific sources or practices that you rely on to keep fueling your creativity time and again?
Yes. One is I love to read. I'm a geek. I like to tell stories and I like to consume information. So I watch movies and TV shows and read books. I talk to guests and I'm learning so much from them. But the people who inspire me the most are the least likely probably that you would imagine. It's the audience. When they ask me a question, it makes me go back into my cave and think, what is my answer? What is my position on this? And then they question you more and more and more, not because they don't believe you, but because they need more help. For a lot of people, it's not as easy as I want to do something. Now I'm going to go do that. They need help. They have limiting beliefs. They have stories that they've told themselves, their self-story, their self-concept that is really holding them back. And I need to work through that. And then what happens is by solving that problem, the message becomes more universal. And you may know this, in the very beginning, we created content for designers mostly. And then it was like creative people, not just designers. And then it was like web developers. And then now it's like I get stopped on the street by people who are plumbers and security people. And the strangest thing, I was recognized at the duty person at the airport where you get your VAT back. And the guy who's super official, military uniform, tie, super serious, stern face, deals with a bunch of idiots every day. And he looks at me, he's like, so you spoke at the conference. And he stamps my paper. And I'm like, does my paper tell you where I was? And he's like, no, because one of my best mates told me they were going to be here. And that's how I know. I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. When you are recognized by airport security, right, like official government people, like, this is pretty good. So the reach is happening. I love that.
Wow, brilliant. And like you mentioned, a lot of people are aware of where you are and what you do. Yeah. And you do a lot of workshops also. I see a lot of content around your talks around your events and workshops. And there are a lot of conversations around design thinking, marketing, personal branding. I see exercises around feel the pain formula, the reframing, the sales strategies, the pricing methods and more, right?
Yes.
Put me in a situation or teach us something fabulous from your wizard book, which probably could be a new learning for everyone.
Well, the single biggest thing that I can try to share with you in the short time that we have together is become an expert at being curious. This is the single most important thing that you can do. And there's many applications of this. And the best way to be curious is there's just two parts. And if you think of a coin has two sides. Otherwise, it's, I don't know what it is. It's one-dimensional element. Right. A coin has two sides. The heads, which is what people focus on, but there's the tails. The head says, ask questions. The tail says, listen to the answer. Right. Ask thought-provoking questions, full of curiosity, without bias, without expectations, while not leading the person. Ask open-ended questions. And then the hardest part is actually listen to what they say. A lot of people ask questions, but they actually don't listen. And I'll give you the classic example, okay? The classic example is this. I'm interviewed a lot on podcasts, and I can tell when the person's engaged in what I'm saying and when they're not. The person who's not engaged has 10 questions. They ask a question, I speak, and they just move to question number 2. And they just keep doing it until they finish the 10 questions. And I think to myself, I just gave you something that was really emotional that I haven't told anybody before, and you're just more interested in finishing a checklist versus like listening to me. So you can tell if a person's listening to you by how they respond physically, emotionally on their face, the micro expressions, but also in their follow-up question. You notice a lot in my podcast, it's not very structured, but when they say something that's interesting, I'll say to them, you said 3 things. I want to recap 2 things. I need to follow up with this other thing. Right. First of all, what I'm doing is I'm playing back to them what I heard. That lets them know you were, in fact, listening. And sometimes if you play back in a way that's clearer than the way they said it, they smile like, wow, that was more succinct than what I had said, but that's the idea. And then I say, I want to circle back to something. then they know that there was something in there that I wanted to pull out and highlight for our audience and our community. And so that makes them feel like, okay, you are listening and this is good. Now, I've made this mistake. This is not by design, where I've actually been on a podcast where I'm supposed to interview somebody, but I was confused if they were interviewing me or if I was interviewing them. We had a big laugh about it, and the person said, hey, I think you're the person who's interviewing me. Should we reschedule? I said, no, let's just try. If it's horrible, then we'll stop and then we'll do this again. I already have you. Let's go. We finished an hour and 10, 20 minutes later, and he told me after the fact, he said, I didn't know any better. I thought you prepared for this. So this tells you something.
Right.
If you just ask good questions and you become an expert at being curious,
right,
it will feel as if you prepared. It will feel as if you meant to have a very intentional conversation.
Right.
And I think that's one of the biggest lessons I can share with you. This works in sales. It works in personal relationships. It works in professional relationships. Learn to be curious.
Chris, that gets me curious right now. Do I fall into the category of podcasters who are like kind of finishing the checklist because there is a personality who they don't want to get wrong most of the times, and hence they go through that checklist saying, hey, get those questions right, read it right before you move on to the next, or is it like we're having a smooth conversation?
I would say you're a hybrid. I know you have questions because I can see your eyes looking to a list, but I also see you responding and reacting to the things that I'm saying. And I'm feeling like this is more conversational than it is A, B, A, B, A, B, right? So you're right in the middle there.
Super. I'm glad I'm in the safe zone there. Super. I'm going to conclude this round with one interesting question, very specific to design. And this is a conversation around a lot of the hype. Everyone's talking about AI taking their jobs and the generative AI generation coming into the picture. This was a conversation I was having with my graphic designer today. And I'm like, I'm going to be hosting Chris Doe today. Do you have any questions for him specific to design? And he had one interesting observation saying the 16-year-olds or the 14-year-olds who want to get into the industry today are put in front of the AI tools, not necessarily telling them to enhance their design skills or even paper skills. A 40 or a 50-year-old designer who comes with 10, 15, 20 years of experience is also put in front of AI, which not necessarily they are ready to embrace it. So where is this going from, and where would it be like 5 years down the line? Like, what are designers really supposed to do at 16 and at 50?
Okay, at 16, you're going to grow up with the technology. You're going to feel as if this has always been the way. You don't know of a time when we used to have payphones where you had to put in coins into a machine, because now everybody carries around with them a phone that's far superior to anything that you can use, where what you have in your pocket is more powerful, 10 times more powerful than the first computer I had in the first 5 years of building my business. So you're walking around with tremendous potential. The drawback, because they're native, right? They're native to the technology and they understand it really well. The drawback is your lack of experience, your lack of education. Maybe you're limited in your tastes and your experiences, so you're not going to know what to ask it for. You can't make the same kinds of references that someone who's been in the business for 45 plus years can. The flip side is this. You're 50 years old. You push back against the technology. You think it's an abomination of what's going on. You think it's the erosion of all things that are good, and this is the beginning of an evil thing. And so you fight and you resist, but you're going to lose out on opportunities. You're going to not take advantage of powerful tools that exist. I want to remind people this, especially if you're a little bit older. There was a time in which designers did not use computers. You would send in copy to a typesetter who would use a machine and typeset based on what it is you asked them to do. And these are highly trained professionals and technicians who knew the rules of typography and would not typeset something that was illegible or in bad taste. And you would get the typeset back and you would give notes and you go back and forth until it was done. And then desktop publishing comes along. And the old guard at that time, the 50-year-olds at that time, just like how AI is viewed now, say, that's horrible. You've democratized design. You put it in hands of people who do not know what they're doing. This is going to be the end of all things good. That has turned out not to be true. And in fact, eventually they all adopt or they die. And they adopt the technology or they hire young people to do it for them. But they're missing out on that connection they have with the tools and technology, which empower you to do what you do, but better. So AI isn't going to change that part of it. It's just yet another new technology that's probably the most powerful piece of technology we've seen ever in the history of humankind. And so now what I encourage the 50-year-olds to do is this: embrace the technology, keep an open mind, dive into it, learn how to use it, and then decide if this is right for you or not. And you'll probably surprise yourself that these tools are incredible. And the thing that you have that the 16-year-olds don't have, you have like references to art, to history, to music, to cinema, to photography. You have good taste. You've been exposed to lots of things. You have a much better ability to articulate what it is that you want or what you don't like. And the machine needs direction from you. It needs you to be curious, to provoke interesting ideas, and it will try many different combinations for you to look at really quickly. And that, to me, is a powerful thing. I'll leave you with this one thought on AI. When I was a kid, probably around 12 or 13 years old, I procrastinated. I didn't study for tests. I didn't write my reports. I didn't read the books. And I would lay in bed late at night thinking, oh my God, my book report's due in 2 days and I haven't started reading the book yet. And I would have these fantasies about being able to do work in my mind. As I drift off into sleep, I wish there was a machine who could read my mind and do the work for me. And this is, I think, the fantasy of many people, boys and girls. And this is the future. Well, the future's here. The future is knocking at the door saying, we're here. Do you want to use this technology where your thoughts can manifest into things, into words and images and videos and 3D models? And yet here, that future we wished for is here, and we're like turning our back on it. I'm confused about humans sometimes.
So do you use personally any of these AI tools? And if yes, then which ones?
I use as many of them that I can wrap my head around, and there are a lot. So I'm using Midjourney. I've tried Stable Diffusion, DALL-E, and I've not had a lot of success. Of course, I'm using Photoshop Beta, Firefly, and that's being integrated everywhere in the Adobe suite. And I'm also using ChatGPT. I've tried Copywriter or copyright.com or something like that, but now that ChatGPT is so accessible and available, I love it. In fact, we are currently working on training a very specific version of ChatGPT based on my teachings, my thoughts, my philosophies, my writings, and it's getting really, really good. We're at version 2.1 right now. I talked to it last night, and I was really impressed because I asked it to do something, and instead of doing something, it asked me more questions back, just like I would working with someone. To a point in which I started getting annoyed. I'm like, just tell me the freaking answer. I need to know the answer right now. Stop asking me questions. It says, okay, let me give you the answer.
No, but you said be curious.
Be curious? Yeah, it was too curious, you know? Yeah. It asked really good questions, really smart questions, actually. It made me think.
Wonderful, wonderful stuff, Chris. This is great knowledge. This is great insights from your end. Thank you so much. That concludes the first round of questions.
Okay.
I'm moving into the last round of questions, which is the opportunity I get to kind of grill you into a rapid fire round of questions. Right. This is going to be fun. So are you ready for it?
I'm not sure. I'm a little scared.
Right then, in 60 seconds, 5 daily disciplines Chris Doe follows in life.
Manage my diet, eating my protein shake and monitoring my calories, working out, responding to questions and things that people have of me, not from my team, but from our audience and our community, writing in my notebook ideas and drawing diagrams.
Okay, fabulous. In 50 seconds, what's the most weirdest design request you have ever received?
The weirdest design request was when somebody asked me to tattoo on them, and I'm not a tattoo artist.
Nice. What did they tell you to tattoo on them?
They're a tattoo artist. They said just draw anything, and they brought their entire kit. And I was super touched and honored to do that, but I do not want to ruin somebody's skin.
Right. Okay, in 40 seconds, what's your go-to dance move when you start celebrating a successful design project?
It's not, I wouldn't even call it dance, it's body flailing about in the air. And it probably looks like I'm having a cardiac arrest or a seizure.
Okay, in 30 seconds, apart from you, 3 people you would recommend everyone else to follow for their content on design, marketing, or personal branding.
I would tell everyone to read the books written by Blair Enns. He's written 2 really amazing books. The other person I would tell them to check out is Ronald J. Baker. He's written several books, super sharp guy, like an economist, an accountant, and just brilliant in how he thinks. Who else do I look up to on socials? I think Neil deGrasse Tyson is an amazing thinker. He's a great storyteller and brilliant mind, and he just makes heady subjects super accessible. So if you study how he communicates and how he teaches, there's humanity to the way that he talks about science.
Wow, brilliant. Okay. In 20 seconds, what's the most bizarre design trend you have ever witnessed in your career?
Oh my gosh. I don't know if any design trend is so bizarre, but I would say like back in the 80s, the colorful neon clothing that people wore, that's part of the California lifestyle, was pretty nasty. And I'm guilty of wearing some pretty bright neon pants.
Awesome. And finally, in 10 seconds, if you were a font, which font would you be and why?
There's no doubt about the answer to this one. I'd be Helvetica, and probably the new Haas Grotesque version, which many people consider to be the finest cut, the closest to the original. The thing about Helvetica is it is very versatile. It has almost no personality, and so it requires much more skill to use it. People hate Helvetica because it's ubiquitous, but I think people hate Helvetica because they don't know how to design and they need a typeface to do more work. So Helvetica is a very difficult typeface to use because you really need to know what you're doing.
Right. Makes sense. Awesome. And I didn't get to grill you too much. You were so good at it. And well, that brings us to the end of the show, Chris. This has been a very, very inspiring, insightful conversation for us. The value anyway from the daily content that you share is immense and lot for everyone to, just get inspired and start getting to do a lot in life and learn from you. So thank you so much for always inspiring, and thank you for making time for this show. I hope you had a good time on the show as well.
I certainly did. That was a very fast 30 minutes, and I appreciate it. I had lots of laughs. I hope your audience and community get some value from our conversation today. If not, you can get a full refund.
Thank you so much, Chris. And I wish you and the future all the very best for everything, and hope you reach that 1 billion landmark very, very, very soon.
Thanks, Dakshin. And I just want to say one thing. I want to remind you and everybody else that's listening, you're not defined by your past. The future is what you make it.
And with that, we come to the end of today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the audio and video channels of the Deliberate Talks and the Pixelated Egg. Join me next week for another story. Until then, be curious, be adventurous, and never stop learning. Cheers.